So welcome and thank you all for joining us today as we discuss some of the current challenges in the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action 30 years after its adoption. My name is Natalia Ursola and I will be your moderator today. This event is hosted by the International Action Network for Gender Equity and Law, IANGEL for short. IANGEL is an international network of lawyers dedicated to promoting gender justice through education, advocacy, and engagement of pro bono legal resources. IANGEL employs pro bono power to advance and protect the rights of women and girls locally, nationally, and globally. We have an amazing lineup of speakers today. At the core of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is the pursuit for gender equality. However, gender equality is far from fully achieved. Gender equality faces myriad challenges nowadays, from restrictions to reproductive justice and freedom to gender apartheid and the gender impacts of environmental and climate crisis. Our panelists are experts on these fields and have been working towards promoting gender equality in diverse scenarios. They will offer some insights as to the challenges, but also the opportunities for the future of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So first we have Beth Parker. She is the General Counsel for Planned Parenthood California Central Coast. In addition to providing legal counsel to multiple Planned Parenthood entities, Beth serves on the board of 3 nonprofit women's health organizations and teaches healthcare law at the University of California Law School, San Francisco. Before joining Planned Parenthood in 2013, she litigated more than 20 reproductive rights and justice cases as a civil litigation partner at Arnold & Porter in San Francisco. Next, we have Nancy Newman. Nancy is the founder and CEO of IANGEL. Nancy is a partner at Hanson Bridget LLP in San Francisco and a lifelong activist for equality and justice. She founded IANGEL in 2013 to harness the power of pro bono legal services and connect it to the struggle to protect and defend the human rights of women and girls globally. She currently leads IANGEL as its executive officer, advancing equality through education, advocacy, and engagement of volunteer legal resources. And last but not least, we have Andrea Mariana Dominguez. Andrea is a Peruvian lawyer specializing in environmental law and natural resources. She is a professor at the Environmental Law Clinic of the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú and the coordinator of the Latin American and Caribbean Alliance of Environmental Law Clinics, recognized by Teachers for the Planet. She holds a master's degree in law and economics and has served as an advisor to the Ministry of the Environment, the Ministry of Culture, and international organizations such as the ILO and the World Bank. Andrea is also a reporter for the Saving Center on Climate Litigation and serves as the Latin America Director for the Global Network for Human Rights and the Environment. Additionally, she is a member of the External Advisory Committee of EPIC Network Latin America, promoting collaborative impact strategies in the region. So before we start, a few housekeeping details. So first, this session is being recorded. We invite you all to ask questions to our panelists. You could type in your questions in the chat box and we will read them later to all of them. Or if you'd like to, you could also use the raise your hand function in Zoom and we will give you an opportunity to speak. If you want to direct the question to someone in particular, please say so when you pose your question. We also ask that you keep your microphones and camera off during the discussion, but then you can, of course, turn them on if you want to pose the question. So now, without further ado, we will start our discussion today. So Nancy, let's dive right in. You have been a gender justice activist for a long time. What does the Beijing Backlash mean to you? And what does it mean for the global struggle for women's human rights?
Well, thank you, Natalia. I'm delighted to be here with you and with Andrea and Beth to share some insights about the Beijing Backlash. Long time is correct. I've been an activist for well over 50 years, half a century. Oi. So I think it's important to consider the backlash that we're all experiencing now in an historical context. I was a child of the 1960s, and when the civil rights movement finally achieved major legislative success, women's equality was being recognized in the courts. The Equal Rights Amendment, which was first proposed in 1923, finally passed with bipartisan support in both chambers of Congress in 1972. And within a year, it passed in 30 of the 38 states needed to ratify. In 1973, Roe versus Wade provided federal constitutional protection for abortion rights. So it was clear to me as a young woman that women's equality was inevitable. It was really just around the corner. Ha! How wrong I was. In fact, the progress that had been made was met with a very strong backlash from the forces of patriarchy and status quo. Those forces amplified and embellished a false narrative of a zero-sum game. That's the notion that if women achieved equality, that would somehow diminish men. And sadly, this baseless trope continues to plague the world to this day. But by the time I became a lawyer in 1983, I realized that the runway was longer than I had thought, but I still was convinced that the world moves towards progress. And I knew that equality is simply a natural development of human organizations. The historic World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995 demonstrated that. Beijing was monumental. When Hillary Rodham Clinton declared from the podium, women's rights are human rights once and for all, it seemed like the whole world was listening, not just the 17,000 delegates that were there. 189 countries adopted the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action, and that created an historical shift in the struggle. It was intended as a comprehensive and actionable agreement to achieve equal rights for women and girls around the world. And it included numerous proposed actions and commitments to put gender equality in every policy and budget and plan, and to create institutions to advance gender equality. It provided ways to encourage women in the economy and ensure equal pay, to take comprehensive measures to eliminate violence against women, to increase the number of women in leadership and political participation, as well as to address the special challenges for girls and young women. And in the years that followed the Beijing Declaration, countries around the world did indeed make significant strides to advance gender equality. They passed legislation, they created new agencies, they created task forces to advance the principles of the platform. But then the Beijing Backlash came. And just like the stalling out of the effort to pass the Equal Rights Amendment 20 years before, the forces of patriarchy and entitlement and greed, old-fashioned greed, pushed back against the Platform for Action. Now, the World Economic Forum created a way to measure the progress, and they called it the Global Gender Gap Analysis Index. It analyzes progress towards gender parity in 145 countries, areas of employment, leadership, education, technology, health, family rights. And in a 2015 report, that's 20 years after Beijing, the report confirmed, guess what? Countries were not meeting their commitments. Progress had slowed to a crawl. The authors said, "It is our hope that this report will serve as a call to action to spur change on an issue that is central to our future. Yet 6 years later, the call to action remained largely unanswered by the world's governments. In 2021, the report observed, if progress towards gender parity proceeds at the same speed observed between 2006 and 2021, the overall gender gap is projected to close in, wait for it, 135.6 years. That's a long wait. Just last week, Equality Now reported an alarming rollback of fundamental human rights relating to women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, and democratic freedoms in the 30 years after Beijing. And that sentiment was echoed just this week by the UN Secretary General at the CSW, who noted that women and girls still face an appalling array of wrongs. Around the world, women's rights defenders face harassment, threats, violence, and even murder. They face shrinking civil space and shrinking funds. The result, the erosion of rights and a deficit of accountability. Now, this is no surprise to any of us, and now we are facing the mother of all backlashes, since the United States has completely abandoned its historic commitments to advancing equality and justice. And yet, through it all, there has been one consistent force to respond to the backlash, working to hold countries accountable to their commitments in the Declaration. That force is you and me and all of us. Civil society activists have responded to corruption and wavering by the member states, and they've been submitting shadow reports to the CSW to tell the full story of what's going on the ground in their countries. And pro bono lawyers working in networks like IANGEL have formed across borders to create a new source of power and solidarity and resilience. Our work, yours, mine, civil society's work, in our own communities, across the country, and even across the world is more important than ever right now. Now, I know from over 50 years of activism, we are strong and we are smart. And our love for our children and our planet is the most powerful force in the world. So I say to you, backlash be damned. I will not consign my daughters to live in a world with fewer rights than I had. And I have no illusions about this. I know it will take time, it will take struggle, and it will be hard to turn this ship around and reclaim the promise of the Beijing Declaration. But don't doubt it for a minute. Equality is the future, and our job now is to work together to claim that future.
Oh, Nancy, well said. Thank you so much for your insight and especially for bringing some personal aspect to it that I find truly valuable in these sort of spaces as well. So now, Beth, from your perspective and experience, what would you say are the biggest challenges nowadays related to reproductive freedom in the US, given the current administration? And more specifically, how has the 2022 Dobbs decision impacted reproductive freedom in the US, and what could be expected in the near future?
Like Nancy, I want to thank you for including me in this conversation. Also, like Nancy, I have been working on these issues for almost 50 years, though pretty much exclusively in the United States. So my remarks are going to focus on what's happened in the US, both what's happened before Dobbs, with Dobbs, and then in the Trump administration. And I joke with a lot of my friends that I have spent most of my career working on these issues, women's rights and reproductive justice in particular, and they're going to be worse off at the end than they were at the beginning. That's not entirely correct, because I graduated high school the year Roe versus Wade, which legalized abortion in America, was decided. And the combination of that decision plus the legalization of contraception by the US Supreme Court only a few years earlier really enabled women to choose if, when, and how many children they could have. And as a result, we did see really dramatic decline in birth rate for women both graduating high school and college. We saw a delay in childbirth. So the average age that a woman had a child went from 21 to over 27 today, and a decline in the average number of children from close to 3 in the 1960s to 1.7 today. Because of that, we have also seen dramatic increases in women taking advantage of educational, employment, and economic opportunities. There are 7 times as many women going to college today as there were before those decisions. And now more women go to college in the United States than men, and more women go to graduate school as well. We've also seen an increase in their participation in the workforce from about 37% to 60% today, and they are almost, not quite, but almost on par with men. And we've seen a narrowing in the gap, though not an elimination, in terms of their wages. So before, women earned about 60 cents for every dollar a man earned, and now that's closer to 82 cents. We've also seen a tremendous decline in both pregnancy, birth rates, and abortion, in particular for teens, which is considered to be a major accomplishment. Unfortunately, we witnessed a tremendous rollback in a lot of these improvements with the Dobbs decision in June of 2022. With that decision, the US Supreme Court said that abortion was no longer a constitutional right, at least under the federal Constitution, and the issue would revert to the individual states. As a result, more than 36 million women in the United States, that's almost half the number of women of reproductive age, no longer have access to abortion where they live. 41 states have passed bans of some form or other. 12 states have done an absolute ban, and another 7 states have done a gestational ban pre-viability, which was completely legal. Abortion was completely legal up to viability under Roe. And unfortunately, most of those states are in the South of the United States or the Midwest. So we have a huge swath of our country where abortion is no longer accessible. Interestingly, the number of abortions has not decreased as a result of the Dobbs decision. But what has happened is that women are now traveling very long distances to access abortion. In fact, we think about 170,000 women a year are now traveling to another state. Most of them are going to neighboring states, such as Illinois, North Carolina, New Mexico, Virginia, because it's easier to travel by car or bus than get on a plane. But the women that are most impacted are low-income women, women of color, and immigrant women who do not have the time and the resources to take time off of school, get childcare, arrange funds for the transportation costs and hotel, and then travel to another state. And as a result, the Guttmacher Institute, which looks at all this and studies this in depth, recently came out with a major report that the infant mortality rate has increased in those states where abortion has been banned. And that rate has particularly increased in populations of women of color. And most disturbing of all, in my view, is we are seeing many states not even treating women who go to hospitals on an emergency basis. The hospitals are flat out refusing to honor what's called EMTALA in the US, the Emergency Medical Treatment Act, which directs hospitals to treat patients regardless of their income in emergency conditions, including if that mandates that they need to have an abortion. And states are not only not obeying that mandate, but they're actually challenging it and saying that the ban in their state preempts federal law. Now, if that weren't bad enough, we have the Trump administration. We are, luckily, with all the different things the Trump administration is doing, a lot of these have not yet come to pass, but we fully anticipate they will. We know that because many of these attacks on women and reproductive rights happened during the first Trump administration, and then were outlined in Project 2025. I'm going to talk very briefly about three. The first is the impact on Medicaid funding. As people may know, the House of Representatives recently have passed a budget reconciliation bill, which directs draconian cuts in our Medicaid program, which funds healthcare for low-income and disabled people. And that program provides healthcare for a large number of Americans. It's 1 in 3 in California alone. And under that program, the federal government funds 50% of the healthcare costs, and the state the remaining 50%. And for family planning, the federal government covers 90% of the costs and states only 10%, because family planning is considered to save government tremendous amount of money, ultimately. So the cuts to Medicaid will dramatically impact the ability of women to get not just access to contraception, but access to diagnosis and treatment of sexually transmitted infections and cancer screenings. The second really major impact we are concerned about with the Trump administration is the rollback or rescission of funding under the Title X program. That was a program adopted in 1971 by the Nixon administration, and it provides funding for contraceptive care for low-income women. It's funded currently at about $263 million. During the first Trump administration, Title X funding was rolled back, and these draconian rules, what's called the gag rule, where people couldn't even mention the word abortion and had to separate abortion care from family planning care, were implemented. And as a result, the number of women who were able to access that program went from 4,000 to 1.5. I mean, from 4 million patients to 1.5 million. And the number of sites who received Title X who could offer that care went from 4,000 to 1,000. And we fully anticipate that that program will get rolled back under this administration as well. And the third really major threat we're facing is the misapplication of the Comstock Act. The Comstock Act was enacted by Congress in 1873, and it prohibits the mailing of any medication or material used for abortion. It has never been implemented or enforced for lawful abortion. Courts that looked at this back in the 1930s said it did not apply. The US Postal Service, which is charged with enforcing it, has not enforced it. And then during the entire duration of Roe versus Wade, nobody even mentioned the Comstock Act. But it is prominently discussed in Project 2025, and a lot of anti-abortion lawyers are now saying they plan to enforce it under the new administration. And if they do, and if courts take a very broad view of the Comstock Act, it will be tantamount to a national abortion ban. And so it will have a major impact on the provision and the availability of abortion in America, because the Comstock Act has criminal liability, and it can be enforced civilly through RICO, the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Practices Act, which threatens treble damages and attorney's fees. So we are looking at all these different threats and are very, very concerned about what is going to happen to women and the provision of reproductive rights and justice during the current administration.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you so much for providing such specifics. I think it really helps to bring some context and nuance to our current times and to better understand the realities that a lot of people are living and that sometimes tend to be overlooked when we are overwhelmed as we are with the news these days. So thank you for that. So now, Andrea, let's turn to a regional perspective. In your work as the coordinator of the Latin American and Caribbean Alliance of Environmental Law Clinics, how do students engage with these issues in the region? Like, what would you say is the biggest challenge for students and communities when it comes to gender equality?
I want to start by thanking IANGEL for this incredible opportunity to engage in such a critical discussion. And I am truly honored to share this space with Nancy, Beth, to inspire leaders in gender justice and legal advocacy. I also want to recognize our moderator, Natalia, for guiding this conversation. As someone deeply involved in environmental law, legal education, and transnational advocacy, I am excited to bring the perspective of the Latin American and the Caribbean Alliance of Environmental Law Clinics to this discussion. This is an initiative dedicated to empowering future legal professionals and advancing environmental justice. First of all, how do students engage with gender and equality issues in the region? In Latin America and the Caribbean, environmental law clinics serve as a bridge between legal education and the real-world advocacy. Our students work directly on cases to address gender, environmental justice, and human rights with a strong focus on strategic litigation, defending women environmental defenders facing legal threats and criminalization, legal research, documenting the violation of indigenous human rights and environmental law, and third, community advocacy, working with Afro-descent, indigenous, and rural women to strengthen legal protections. One of our key objectives is to embed gender justice in legal education. We ensure that students understand how environmental degradation disproportionality affects women, why women play a key role in local environmental governance, and how to develop gender-sensitive legal strategies in environmental litigations. Examples of our works include forest conservation cases in Peru, where women indigenous leaders advocate against illegal mining, deforestation, and different illegal activities. Marine ecosystem protection effort in coastal communities where women are key stakeholders. Legal challenge to illegal mining in the Amazon, addressing its impact on women and girls. So through interdisciplinary and transnational collaboration, our students gain practical skill while actively contributing to justice efforts. The second question about what I am saying to it's going to be the biggest challenge for the students and communities when it's come to gender equality. I would say that one of the big challenge is access to justice. With the environmental law clinics, our mission is, we have two missions at the same time, but the same methodology. First is train capacities, knowledge, ability for the students to be future lawyers with the sustainability approach, and at the same time, contribute to reduce the barrier of access to justice, that in Latin America and the Caribbean, this is one of the most important issues. Women environmental defenders and indigenous leaders often face criminalization and violence for protecting their lands, have limited access to legal representation and institutional support, experience forced displacement due to climate change and extractivism. There are also structural barriers within legal education itself. Gender biases in legal training, environmental law is still seen as secondary of a specialized field, limited resources for clinical legal education, restricting opportunities for hands-on learning, a lack of gender sensitivity legal framework, making litigation more challenging. So to address this, we are working to expand clinical legal education to reach more students and communities, train students in gender sensitivity legal strategies to improve their litigation skills, and strengthen transnational collaboration so students learn from different legal systems. We believe that transforming the legal education is the key to ensuring long-term structural change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. That's truly fascinating, and I think it's very important to also bring the voices of the younger generations that we see every day are fighting for all of our rights in a very courageous way. So it's great to have that perspective also in both in terms of you providing them with the opportunities to train in different issues, but also being able to bring their knowledge and all their energy to the courts, to the cases, to strategic litigation that you were mentioning. So I think that's very valuable as well. So another pressing issue that we've seen in recent times at the international level is gender apartheid. Nancy, I know IANGEL has been actively fighting the de facto system of gender apartheid in Afghanistan. Please tell us more about this work and how it provides a source of empowerment and hope in these challenging times.
Thank you. Well, of course, gender equality is a global issue, and it's not just in Afghanistan. All women everywhere deserve to live freely, to make their own decisions, and to enjoy full and equal rights and opportunities. But around the world, including in the United States, as we've already heard from Beth, this promise has not been realized. And we know from the World Economic Forum's analysis that we're over 5 generations away from the goals. But nowhere in the world is the situation for women and girls more serious and heartbreaking than in Afghanistan. Since the Taliban reclaimed power in August of 2021, they've enacted well over 100 edicts now in a systematic effort to deprive women and girls of basic human rights to which they're entitled under international law, and rights which are recognized all around the world, except in Afghanistan. We don't have time to list the relentless edicts of degradation and dehumanization that the Taliban have inflicted upon the women and girls of Afghanistan, but a few key ones include denial of the right to education. Girls above 6th grade are forced to stop school. Women were forced out of universities. Denial of the right to work in many sectors. And in the remaining sectors, the salaries of women are reduced to unlivable levels. This just forces women into dependence and destitution. Denial of the right to access justice. When the Taliban came to power, women lawyers were no longer allowed to practice law. Denial of the right to move freely. Women were required to have a male guardian, a mahram, with them when they leave their homes, which means, an adult woman can't leave her home to go to the market, but if she's accompanied by her 6-year-old son, that's okay. I mean, these things are so ridiculous. Women can't go to parks. They can't play sports. They're denied the right of expression. They're denied the right to be seen or heard. Recently, they criminalized women's voices, even in private homes, and they're even denied the right to sing. In essence, Afghan women have been erased from society and are being suffocated in their homes. So yes, legal scholars have described this system as gender apartheid. And it is a humanitarian catastrophe and an ongoing crime against humanity. And while Afghan women continue to hope for help from the international community, their wait continues. Many NGOs have ceased operating in the country. US aid is gutted, and the US government has shown profound disdain for any work that advances equality or justice. Yet, IANGEL, a small nonprofit powered by volunteer lawyers, refuses to abandon our Afghan women sisters. And IANGEL is fighting gender apartheid in a variety of ways. First, for years now, we have been supporting underground education for girls and women in Afghanistan. These underground schools, we're in contact with about 5 of them, are led by just remarkable, brave, determined Afghan women educators who are just determined to keep the hopes and dreams of young Afghan women alive. They just refuse to submit whatever risks they take. We provide economic and emotional support for them. And importantly, we amplify their voices of protest. And they are active in resistance. They provide their protests to us in words, in photos, in videos, and in artwork. And we amplify those. And we remind them that we are with them. And that makes a huge difference. We're also working with the amazing Afghan women's human rights defender Zubaida Akbar at FEMINA and a talented team of pro bono lawyers at a global law firm on a comprehensive legal research report analyzing the Taliban's edicts as violations of international law and providing new recommendations for action and accountability to provide to the international community. Afghan women want to be heard. They want something done about this situation, and the international community needs to step up. And third, we have our BRIDGE project. BRIDGE is an acronym, Building Real Interactions to Drive Gender Equality. And this is a project through which IANGEL connects directly with Afghan women lawyers inside Afghanistan. And we meet with them once a month. We provide economic, emotional, and professional support to them. They are not allowed to practice law, but they are kick-ass women. They are really impressive. Many of these were trial lawyers for many years. They have lots of experience in the courts. They know their country. They know their systems. And, the first obstacle was that they didn't, that they didn't have any source of income to support their families anymore. So we're addressing that with modest monthly stipends that allow them to support their families. Then we connect with them to show them that we are all part of this interconnected world. And we meet and we hear their stories. They present to us, we present to them. We have speakers of interest on topics of international law and human rights. And they pay it forward because we are now helping to support them and their families. They donate their skills pro bono to women, Afghan women in their communities to help them address the myriad of injustices that are ongoing in Afghanistan. And you may ask, well, if they're not allowed to practice law, how are they able to help women in their communities? And you would be amazed and impressed at how resourceful and clever and dedicated these women are. They know how the system works. They can gather facts. They talk to women in prison. They make cases. They write briefs, and they've gotten, women released from unlawful detention. They are making a difference in their communities. And I have to say that this is really a remarkable two-way street of benefits. yes, we help them with resources and support, but they help us in so many ways. This project, every month when I meet with these women and they present and we talk to them and we get to know them, and it has provided a remarkable source of strength and perspective and inspiration for me personally. That is just so important right now. I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff going on in our country right now, and it is a shock to our system. But I will say these Afghan women are so strong and so resolute and so determined that I think, well, you know, they can be that strong in their circumstances. I'm strong in my circumstances, and we are all in this together. And as an example, I want to read a comment. The head of our bridge project in Afghanistan, the woman that manages it with us, is a lawyer and a journalist, and she writes regularly for the Jurist publication under an anonymous byline. And just on February 28th, she published an interview that she had with a 15-year-old girl, Afghan girl, who talks about what it was like when she was in school and then suddenly she had to stop school, and the shock to the system. She's all the hopes and dreams, and her, the leadership just saying, too bad for you. And at the end of her interview, this is in the Jurist in February 28th, this 15-year-old girl said, "In the end, I still want to believe that one day our situation will change and we will be able to live our lives with freedom and dignity that we deserve. But until that day comes, we will continue to resist, to hope, and to fight for a better tomorrow." From her lips to our ears. Really inspiring.
Really inspiring. Yeah, thank you for sharing IANGEL's work on that and these remarks. Now, Beth, despite the dire situation we're currently living, there's still hope. What could activists and civil society do to support each other, to amplify their voices, and to continue advocating for equality and empowerment?
Well, first, I want to thank Nancy for telling us about Afghanistan, because I had no idea how dire the situation was there, and then how inspiring the work that's going on is. It's really inspirational. I think what I'm going to say is geared towards the United States again, but I'm a strong believer in collaboration and community. And Nancy's story about what's happening in Afghanistan is a great example of that. Post the election here, many people were bemoaning the lack of any widespread protests like we saw with the Women's March during the first Trump administration. But most groups that I work with were actually doing a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes, and really had been doing that since last summer, when we first became concerned that we might have a second Trump administration. And we worked really hard to try to figure out what the threats would be and then strategize the best way to fight back. And I think there's really a multi-pronged approach. Clearly, political is one. And, we have very small margins in both the House and the Senate. So there are chances to really focus on that. Second is litigation. Third is working, if you are in a blue state, with your state government very closely. And third is working within your organizations on operational and financial readiness and contingency plans. And we've already seen the benefits of that sort of underground work on litigation There's been a huge amount of challenges to the Trump executive orders in particular, and great success. And I can tell you, having been a litigator for decades, that work cannot be done overnight. That takes many, many hours and coordination between lots of people to get to the point where you can file a temporary restraining order and succeed. So, and then we're also seeing the blue state attorney generals working collaboratively together, also doing these challenges. And we're seeing a lot of victories in the courts. Whether that stands up remains to be seen, but I think that is a very big sign. But, you know, courts and lawyers can't be the only thing. We really need to turn the tide of public perception and support. And we're finding that's very hard to do when Trump and Musk really control the megaphone currently by their ownership of X and social media. But we're beginning to see, you know, the downturn in approval ratings. And I think as the draconian policies really start hitting people in their own lives, we're going to see further, you know, people coming to the fore. And I think it's just really important that people continue to work in community and try to come together and figure out what are the best ways of showing our disapproval and getting our voices out there. And I will tell you one thing I found very powerful post-Dobbs is the power of stories. We have been talking for decades about how to get people to think differently about abortion in America. And it really wasn't until Dobbs when many, many women came out and told their stories, and that began to sort of permeate the media, that we're seeing a shift. The support for abortion now in the US is over 70%. It's the highest it's been in more than 50 years. And I think that's as a result of these stories. So I think the more that we can work in community and be able to get people to stand up and tell their stories and get that out there and really have voice the impact these policies have on them, I think we will see some strides. And I want to end with a quote from Justice Alito, of all people. He said in the Dobbs decision that women are not without electoral or political power. We can seek to affect the legislative process by influencing public opinion, lobbying legislators, voting, and running for office. And I think we should all take his word for it and really do all of that. Really lobby as we can, run for office if we can, and most importantly, vote. And I think that's our best chance for seeing some pushback on the policies we're experiencing today.
Amen.
Who would have thought, right? Andrea, same question for you. What do you think activists and communities can do to support each other, to amplify their voices and continue advocating for equality and empowerment?
First of all, I think that transnational collaboration is essential in addressing the interconnected challenge of gender inequality, environmental justice, and human rights. Many of the threats faced by women environmental defenders, such as criminalization, land dispossession, and violence, are not confined to one country or region. Instead, they are part of a broader global pattern of environmental and gender injustice, often linked to extractivism, weak legal frameworks, and systematic discriminations. To counter these threats, activists and community must work beyond borders, strengthening networks of solidarities, legal supports, and advocacy strategies. The Latin American and the Caribbean Alliance of Environmental Law Clinics actively promote three key actions in these regards. First, amplifying the voices of women defenders. One of the most urgent needs is to ensure the visibility and protection of women environmental defenders, who are often at the forefront of climate justice, but face silencing, criminalization, and even violence. To address this, we engage in legal accompaniment and defense for women facing threats due to their activism, strategic litigation, and amicus curiae brief that elevate their cases to national and international human rights bodies, public campaigns and media advocacy that highlights the crucial role of women defenders in protecting the environment. For example, in recent years, we have worked with legal clinics and advocacy groups to challenge the criminalization of indigenous women leaders defending their territories from deforestation and illegal mining. By connecting their cases to broader legal debates on human rights and environmental law, we help shape narratives that recognize their work as a fundamental contribution to democracy and sustainability. Second, building legal capacity in frontline communities. Legal empowerment is one of the most effective tools for advancing environmental and gender justice. Many communities facing environmental harms and human rights violations lack access to legal knowledge, resources, or representations, which make it difficult to navigate legal system or hold powerful actors accountable. To bridge this gap, we focus on training women leaders in environmental law and legal defense strategies so they can advocacy for their rights, developing community-centered legal frameworks, ensuring that environmental and gender-just policies reflect local realities, creating legal toolkits and resources tailored to indigenous, Afro-descent, and rural communities, addressing issues such as land rights, climate justice, and corporate accountability. For example, in the Amazon, women-led organizations have been actively working to document and legal challenge illegal land issued by extractivist industries. Our clinic provides legal training and support, helping them engage with national and international mechanisms, such as Inter-American Court of Human Rights and United Nations Special Procedures. And the third is a strengthening partnership between academia, grassroots movement, and international organizations. Collaboration across sectors is the key to scaling up legal and advocacy efforts. Universities, legal professors, NGOs must work hand in hand with grassroots movement, indigenous organizations, and affected communities to ensure that legal strategies are not imposed from above, but rather to co-develop with those most effective. This means bridging the gap between legal academia and the social movements by making clinical legal education more action-oriented, fostering long-term collaboration between students, professors, and grassroots organizations, ensuring sustained legal support for environmental defenders, and engaging with international advocacy spaces, such as United Nations, the Inter-American Human Rights System, and the Global Climate Negotiation, to push for stronger protections. Our collaboration work on illegal mining, for example, in the Amazon, involved legal clinics from Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, and Brazil. This is a powerful model of how partnership can create impact. We are mapping state obligations related to gender and environmental protection, engaging with women-led environmental movement to co-develop legal strategies, and strengthening legal protection for defenders across national borders. This case exemplified how legal education can be transformed into a tool for justice, directly for supporting women environmental defenders and their communities, while contributing to broader legal and policy changes. Thank you very much.
That's great. And I would like to highlight how you mentioned the need to make more visible the stories and the just lived experiences of women environmental and human rights defenders, which I think ties in really well to what Beth was talking just before you. And it also makes us shift our focus towards what I believe is one of the most important tools, analytical tools that we could use in today's in studying and working towards eliminating or fighting against today's issues in gender inequality, which is intersectionality. And as we have seen, and of course you are all very experienced, and I'm sure you've seen how gender inequality permeates across many systems of oppression, including race, age, ethnicity, disability, class, and many more. So I would like to ask you now, all of you, how have you used intersectionality in your work, and what do you believe is the added value that this analytical tool offers to achieving gender inequality, equality?
So I'll take a stab at that. Is that okay? Okay. So, I mean, I guess first, I mean, a disclaimer: I don't claim to be an expert on intersectionality. I am an activist and an advocate, but to my mind, the key tactic of those who would keep women down is to classify and divide us against each other, whether that's by gender or orientation or ethnicity or religion or any other category. So it's important to use an intersectional lens to appreciate the interconnected elements of oppression in order for us to work together towards our common goals. From the very first opportunity that I had to work with women lawyers from other countries on gender equality initiatives, I learned that we have far more in common than we have differences. It was such a delight to get to work with women lawyers in other countries on these issues, and really, you know, we all want the same things for our communities and our children. We all benefit when we see and endeavor to understand the lived experiences of each other. So I think an intersectional lens is key to that process, as it forces us to consider the embedded layers of discrimination when we develop policy initiatives to promote equality more broadly. I know that civil society advocates are more effective and more powerful when they recognize and embrace common humanity, regardless of any dominant classification. And I think civil society activists know this. One example that comes to mind, you know, the women teachers that we work with in underground schools in Afghanistan, they are active in the resistance, and their resistance is not just advocacy for women and for education, but it's also for a recognition of ethnic discrimination, and we have amplified their voices against the Taliban crackdown and discrimination against ethnic minorities, Hazara and Tajik genocide. Basically, you know, there have been terrible discrimination against ethnic minorities in Afghanistan, and the women's rights activists are active in resisting that as well, which is really heartening to see. I think you know, an example of a challenge we're seeing now is the vicious new attacks on the trans community. That this is a classic othering, and we all must resist it at every step. We have to stand in solidarity with this community and all communities that experience the backlash against their full and equal participation in society. I was reminded recently of the poem by Martin Niemöller after World War II, when he said, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. And then they came for trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." So we ignore this message at our peril. We all have to remember that our struggle cuts across all lines: race, gender, ethnicity, religion, and culture. We're in it together, and we have to stand up for each other.
And there, Beth, you wanna add?
That was very well said. I also am not an expert in this area, but I have been blessed to have worked my entire career in very, very diverse environments and felt I have learned tremendously by working with people from all different backgrounds. And the reproductive justice work we do really does cross all these different spheres. And as Nancy just said, the trans work in particular, which we do, the Planned Parenthood does do gender affirming care. It's incredibly important. It's actually a relatively small number of patients, and the providers that do that work are not used to being attacked the way they have been in the last couple of months. So I think it's really important to band together with them and to be in solidarity with them during this extremely difficult time, because they, you know, they're just totally under the gun right now in ways that are just vicious and callous and inhumane, and we all need to be standing up for them.
Internationality is not just like a theoretical concept. I think it is a fundamental tool for designing legal strategies, shaping advocacy efforts, and ensuring that justice mechanisms are truly inclusive. In my work with the Latin American, the Caribbean Alliance of Environmental Clinics, and also the Global Network of Human Rights and Environmental, we have seen firsthand how gender inequalities is deeply intertwined with racial, economical, and environmental justice. So how does international intersectionality manifest in environmental justice? Women environmental defenders, especially indigenous and Afro-descent women in Latin America, experience multiple overlapping layers of oppression, including gender discrimination. Women are often excluded from decision-making spaces and legal proceedings related to lands and environmental governance. Racial and ethnic marginalizations, legal systems frequently fail to recognize the right and legal claims of indigenous and Afro-descent communities. Environmental and economic precarity, the destruction of ecosystems due to extractivist industry disproportionately affect women who are often primary caregivers and responsible for food securities in their communities, and criminalization and violence. Women defenders face gender-based violence, intimidation, and legal persecution for protecting their lands. For example, in Peru and Colombia, we have supported legal action by indigenous women defending their territories for illegal mining and deforestation. By applying an international intersectionality lens, we ensure that legal arguments consider the cultural and spiritual significance of lands to indigenous women, the impact of environmental destruction on women's economic independence, and the intersection between climate change, forced displacement, and gender-based violence. So why does intersectionality matters in legal education and litigation? I think it's held first as design legal strategy that reflects real-life complexities. Many legal frameworks treat gender, race, and environmental harm as separate issues. An intersectionality approach allows us to connect these struggles and develop more holistic legal arguments. We integrate indigenous legal traditions and community-led governance models into litigation, ensuring that legal strategies are not imposed from outside, but co-create with affected communities. It also ensures policy reform address structural inequalities. Many legal and policy reform fail to address the compound discrimination that women defenders face. Through intersectional analysis, we push for a stronger legal protection that recognize multiple vulnerabilities. For example, in our advocacy for environmental human rights defenders, we have urged governments to develop gender sensitivities mechanisms for protection, ensuring that women defenders have access to emergency legal assistance, psychological protection, and physical protection, and also financial support. And it strengthens advocacy by centering the voices of the most affected communities. By incorporating intersectionality into legal education, we ensure the future lawyers are trained to recognize and challenge system oppressions. We encourage law students to work directly with communities, ensuring that legal responses are grounded in the life experience of those on the front lines of environmental defense. Thank you so much.
Very well said, Andrea. I would just add that intersectionality also allows us to bring attention to a new, like a specific form of oppression that is at the intersection of all these different systems. So not only it does bring attention to the idea of different classifications that has been made by the dominant gaze, but also how there's a lot of people that live in the intersection of those. So it's not just and as it began, it highlighted and shifted the focus towards the experiences of Black women, for example, who were being excluded from both white feminism and from Black movements that were led by Black men. So those at the intersection tend to be overlooked, and using this tool allows us to bring their experiences to the front line. So I think we are almost at the end of our time. I want to give some time for the audience to pose questions. I think we have one question already in the chat. Before going there, I wanted to ask our panelists, is there anything else you would like to add? Do you want to ask something, or maybe respond to something, expand or on something that you already said?
I'd like to I have some final comments. I just I want to recognize that the moment that we're in, and it feels like the world is upside down. I mean, this is a stressful time for equality advocates. Norms are being shattered every day. Alliances shredded. The highest levels of the United States government are showing just no respect at all for basic principles of democracy, constitutional order, human rights. It is a lot to process, and it's just a lot to process. I know people are feeling it. My friends are feeling it, people I know, and we're all feeling it. But understand that chaos and cruelty, that's the point. They want us to feel that way. So I've told I won't let them get in my head. I just refuse. I know we are each more powerful than we think we are. Every single human has more power than she thinks she has. It is our duty now just to stand up and speak out. Use your mind, use your voice, use your love. People will listen. And when you stand up and assert power, you create power in that process. And realize, and this is important, We are more powerful than they are. You may not feel like it, you may not believe it, but it's true. And that's because their goals are impossible. Okay? I don't care what they do. They're not going to make America white again. This is just not going to happen. Like, they may want that to be the case. It's not going to happen. They're not going to make America straight again. Like, America is a diverse, multicultural country, and people are different, and they can't do anything about that. So their goals are impossible, and we're working for the future, for our daughters, for our planet, for our sons, and really they're just trying to hold back time. And that's like pushing water uphill. That's how I know we will ultimately prevail. I may not be with you when it happens, but I know in my bones it's going to happen. So my favorite metaphor of the time is this bison metaphor that I read in Jess Craven. When the big storms come on the prairie, all the little animals run and scurry and hide underground. Okay, but the bison, they move together and they walk toward the storm. So we are the bison. We stay in the struggle, work together, find time to recharge, find joy. Joy is a form of resistance. Play music, sing songs, spend time outdoors with nature, be with your family, and be proud of what you're doing to preserve the legacy of all those who came before. And now it's our time to save the world for those who come after us.
Very well said. I'll add one small piece. I read a sociologist a few weeks ago who was talking about how do we deal in these incredibly complex times. And she said, focus on 2 or 3 small issues and then just try to not listen to the rest. And I've been really trying to do that. It's very easy for me because my work is very directed and overwhelming at the moment. But I think that's very good advice, just to focus on 1 or 2 things that you can work on, that you're expert on, and do that and just ignore all the noise. They want us to be so distracted that we can't accomplish anything, and we can come back on that.
Well, I have a question. I have a question for Beth. Can we, your point, and actually both Beth and Andrea mentioned this, about telling stories, and it's certainly true. Litigators understand this, that stories are more powerful than statistics. And I think the stories there are more being told, but they need to be told more. As time goes by, with so many things breaking in our society, real life consequences. It's not just numbers, it's real life consequences. People will die, and those stories need to be told. And I'm hoping that there's some effort nationally to tell those stories. I mean, I think the efforts to eradicate reproductive rights are just so misguided, and their arrogance is exceeded only by their stupidity, and it's going to have consequences, and we in our communities have to make sure those consequences are perceived by everybody. So
one thing almost anybody can do is tell their own story if they have one that's important on social media. This is outside of this area, but in the US, recently a lot of the Park Service employees were laid off. And a lot of individual Park Service employees on Instagram told why they were so passionate about their job and the impact it was going to have on their lives. Often, most of them lost their housing in addition to their jobs. And I thought that was a very powerful tool. Most everyone I know is really sympathetic to the Park Service employees, and they really got their stories out. So I think that's a good model for people to think about, is any individual, if they're impacted, can tell their story in a very powerful way. And the more stories that are out there, it's harder for people to ignore the devastating impact of a lot of these policies we're seeing currently.
So I'm really grateful to everybody that joined. Thank you for being with us. I'm really grateful to the panelists and to Natalia for leading us through this discussion. It was great. Really, really delighted to be here. I feel more powerful for being with you and sharing this experience, more hopeful. And that's what it's all about. We are the force we've been waiting for.
Yes, thank you. I echo Nancy's words. Thank you so much for being here. I learned so much from all of you, like really inspiring, just listening to you talking about what you do on a daily basis and for so many years too. That's great to have such insights from such experienced activists in gender justice. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time being here. Thank you to the audience for being here and listening to us. Thank you for your questions. Please do reach out. Let's keep in touch, as it was mentioned by all three of you in different parts of the event. Coalition building it's important, is key in fighting against gender inequality and injustice.
Connect with us at iangel.org.